Well, this is a cold and blustery November 22nd, and it's a day that I shall never forget because it is the day of President Kennedy's death. I was a 10-year-old child, but it was a remarkable influence on my life. Indeed, in my office I have a painting of that remarkable photograph of young John saluting the caisson with his father's casket as it went by. It was a sad and terrible time for America. And yet I think President Kennedy's legacy has been overlooked in some ways. True, the nation still remembers, or at least there are enough of us around that still remember the idealism and the hope that he had. But there were many accomplishments that he made that I think truly made a difference in this country. I guess first that comes to mind is the Peace Corps. This idea that young Americans could go and service to other countries. It's had a remarkable effect on the world, and it's helped those Americans in the process. His insistence that we win the race to the moon, the new frontier, was his idea. But this idea after Sputnik that we might be behind the Iron Curtain and that we needed to move forward with American ingenuity and create a space program. And what we garnished from that program is unbelievable. Things from transistors to mylar to all sorts of scientific and technological breakthroughs. Kennedy said that he got where he was by not trusting experts, and that was certainly true during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Joint Chiefs of Staff encouraged him to start a war. Instead, he created the blockade and stared the Russians down with a little help from backdoor negotiations. And Nikita Khrushchev knew that we did have an advantage in nuclear striking force. But Kennedy should get the credit for keeping the world out of war. It was a remarkable challenge for a brand new president. He began work in civil rights and racial integration and a number of things. But I guess for me, the greatest legacy is he inspired me and a lot of young people to get in politics. We'd just seen a bunch of old guys, and they were mostly guys, who didn't seem to have a sense of humor or a sense of idealism or a liberal education. Kennedy was witty and clever and exciting and inspiring, telling us to ask not what our country could do for us, but what we could do for our country, reminding us in his great inaugural that on earth God's work is our work. Listen to his wit, some of his quotes. He said, "Do you realize the responsibility I carry? I'm the only person standing between Richard Nixon and the White House." He said, "Forgive your enemies, but never forget their names." He also said that he didn't think the intelligence reports are all that hot. He said, "Some days I get more out of the New York Times." When accused of buying votes using his father, Ambassador Kennedy's great wealth, many of which came from the liquor business, he was accused in West Virginia of buying votes. He claimed that he got a wire from my generous daddy, "Dear Jack, don't buy a single vote more than is necessary. I'll be damned if I'm going to pay for a landslide." This is how he diffused this talk of his wealth, of his lofty Boston Brahmin upbringing. He made fun of himself, made jokes about himself, and got people to look at the real issues and not the fake ones. I have always loved something he said at a dinner honoring the American Nobel laureates at the White House. He said, "I think this is the most extraordinary collection of talent, of human knowledge that has ever been gathered together at the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone." He also said, when he was a great and noted graduate of Harvard, but when Yale gave him an honorary doctorate, he said, "It might be said now that I have the best of both worlds, a Harvard education and a Yale degree." President Kennedy became a war hero when his PT boat was sunk. And when asked how he became a war hero, he responded with pure modesty, "It was absolutely involuntary. They sank my boat." And finally, once when asked why he really wanted to be the President of the United States, he said, "The pay is good and I can walk to work. So he brought a new sense of wit, a new sense of excitement, a sense of erudition, a sense of intellect, a sense of history, the liberal arts education, a dynamic young family, and he was what America needed. We were so sad, and the old Irish song, "Johnny, We Hardly Knew Ye," was played a lot during his funeral. It's amazing to see what he accomplished in 3 years. Would he have succeeded in a second term to have built on that legacy, or would the problems of Vietnam overwhelmed him as they did LBJ? It's hard to say. But I, for one, am really glad that John Fitzgerald Kennedy graced the American stage and was President of the United States. So on this November 22nd, take some time to remember the man who inspired my generation like no one else has, John Fitzgerald Kennedy.